Okay, good afternoon, friends. We're live on Facebook, and we at the Daily Tribune we have some of the we recruited some of the best minds in to to, to tell us about the nuclear issues, particularly on safety, and we're trying to establish first whether the Philippines does in fact have the constitutional the authority or permission to go nuclear, and then we're baselining whether we have that, and then we'll talk about cost and benefits and then safety issues. Mark will first tell us about whether we have that constitutional power to.
Yeah, you asked me earlier
Yes.
whether the Constitution bars nuclear in the Philippines.
Mhm.
The Constitution bars the use of nuclear technology for weapons. The Constitution, the opposite is true, that the Constitution uh, mandates the promotion of nuclear technology for peaceful uses.
Civilian use.
And so, one of the biggest peaceful uses of nuclear is for energy, for electricity. And so, the Constitution promotes the use of nuclear energy in the Philippines. It's quite the opposite of what many people think. That's a non-issue.
I say okay. We also have Michael Shellenberger here. He will state his case about where the Philippines should go from here.
Can I say something about Michael Shellenberger
Okay.
before he goes on?
Okay.
I invited Michael Shellenberger to come to the Philippines. I met him approximately 4 years ago on Twitter, right? Because of my advocacy. I was a congressman till 2010, and then from 2010 to 2016, I'm just a normal citizen up to now. And I did not stop my advocacy after I finished becoming a congressman. And it surprised me that some environmentalists who were previously rabidly anti-nuclear in the United States, in the UK, in Australia, and all over the world, started becoming pro-nuclear because their favorite technologies, solar and wind, were failing to stop the emissions of carbon into the atmosphere. And so they worried that there was no practical solution to global warming and climate change. And they saw nuclear as the ultimate solution to global warming and climate change, to stopping the emission of CO2. 2 years ago, I visited my daughter, who lives in the United States, in San Francisco. And I said, I'm here already. Why don't I go see these guys that I know on Twitter? And he was in Berkeley, and he founded an organization called Environmental Progress. And so I gave them a call. They allowed me to visit them, their offices, and I met their staff, their technical people, the people gathering data, analyzing data, and I was impressed. And then I invited him to dinner in San Francisco with a colleague of his. We got together, we hit it off, and that was the end of that. And then last year, the government started saying things in the newspaper that they were interested in revisiting the possibility of nuclear, modular reactors, Bataan nuclear power plant. And I thought to myself, it's about time the Filipinos heard it from, not from me, not from Mark Cojuangco, but from somebody else, that they, environmentalists, were really looking at nuclear as a solution to global warming and climate change. So I called him up. I said, I'm getting old. I'm getting tired, and I have to pass the baton.
You're still young.
And I said, would you be interested in explaining to the Filipino people what you're all about? Why do you believe in nuclear? And said, before I go there, he said, come with me to Taiwan, because I have something to do in Taiwan in the next. That was two months ago, almost 3 months ago. So I went to Taiwan, and he was helping Taiwanese volunteers fight against an anti-nuclear government who has an anti-nuclear law that they wanted to overturn. And so volunteers campaigning in the train station, giving out flyers, giving out a few t-shirts, and talking on TV, on social media, professors from university, they were able to convince over 5 million Taiwanese to vote in a referendum against the anti-nuclear law, and they won. And that inspired me. And I said, if that can happen in Taiwan, and the sitting government is anti-nuclear, why can't it happen in the Philippines that the Filipinos can't be enlightened on the benefits and merits of nuclear power? And so, Michael is here.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Mr. Shellenberger here to lay the case for us for pursuing a nuclear program in terms of what will it cost us in terms of environment and monetary, obviously, as well as the benefits of such a program. And then later, we will towards the closing moments of this program, we will talk about the safety issues, because obviously that's very close to all of us as humans, not just Filipinos, but as global citizens. Okay, so
Sure. Well, so like most people, when I was a boy, I grew up very afraid of nuclear energy. I thought that nuclear energy was the same thing as nuclear weapons. So when we were kids, there was a lot of TV shows about nuclear war, and at the same time, we were building nuclear plants, and I thought that if there was a problem at the nuclear plant, it would go off like a bomb. And I never thought twice about it. Around the same time, The Simpsons became a TV show, and we all learned that nuclear waste was green and liquid, so we got our information from the television and movies. I became an activist on air pollution and climate change, and as we were running the numbers, trying to figure out how to power the world on solar and wind turbines, like the windmills you see around here, we couldn't figure out how to do it. There's just, you would have to cover too much land with solar and wind. And at a certain point, if you're trying to protect the natural environment, you're taking up all the natural environment with solar and wind. So some friends of ours said, well, why don't you take a second look at nuclear power, because it doesn't produce any air pollution. So we were very scared at first, but we looked at the information. I was very afraid of Chernobyl because that happened when I was a boy. And so I started to read the World Health Organization reports, the United Nations reports. I always tell people to not take my word for it.
3 Mile Island also.
Well, you know, it's funny. So that's the best one. I mean, we used to say that there's 3 bad accidents. Now we only say there's 2. Because 3 Mile Island, 1979, there was the reactor melted. It was a meltdown, a full meltdown, but hardly any radiation escaped. If you were standing right next to it, it was just the same amount that you get from an X-ray. Nobody was harmed. It worked like it's supposed to work. If there's a problem, it's supposed to contain it. Chernobyl, the worst accident by far. According to the United Nations, 28 people died, and between 100 or 200 people may die over about 50 years. So it's terrible when anybody dies in an accident, but when you compare that to the deaths from ordinary air pollution, like the air that you breathe in Manila, according to the World Health Organization, 4 million people die every year from breathing the smoky air, and 3 million die from breathing the smoke from wood burning. So many poor Filipinos still burn wood for their main source of energy. So we're talking about 7 million people a year, or 700 million people over 100 years, versus somewhere around 200 people. So there's really no comparison. So why are we still so afraid of it? I think it has to do with our association. It's the same word, nuclear power, nuclear weapons. So we get confused. But I think, look, people used to believe that there were witches in the world, and that we used to, in the United States, we used to burn witches at the stake, and then we learned that they weren't witches. I think that it's taken a while, but I think that humankind can get over these irrational fears of nuclear power.
So just like in Salem, are we in that in the Philippines? Do we have a Salem?
Here you have this. You've built a nuclear plant, and it's been sitting there for 30 years in Bataan, and nobody wants to turn it on. And meanwhile, you're killing yourself by burning coal and wood and smoke. So how many people have died in the Philippines because of these superstitious fears of nuclear power? But that's not even the worst of it. Okay, the worst of it is the Philippines doesn't have its own energy. So you have to pay huge billions of dollars a year to foreign countries, including the United States, Australia, Indonesia, to import energy. Electricity prices in the Philippines are 3 times higher than the cost of electricity in South Korea. I spent some time in South Korea. Why South Korea also doesn't have its own energy? Why does it spend 1/3 as much on electricity as the Philippines? Because they have nuclear power. With nuclear power, you still have to import the fuel, but the fuel is just 20% of the cost of nuclear energy, as opposed to 70-80% for natural gas, coal. So if you want to grow as an economy, the per capita income in the Philippines is like $3,000 a year. In Korea, it's more like 30,000, 10 times higher. If you want to grow and become a big economy, good jobs, high-paying jobs, you have to lower the price of energy. The only way to lower the price of energy is with nuclear power.
So, there's this proposal to rehabilitate and operate that
Right.
closed plant in Bataan. Well, what will it cost us in terms of
So
putting it back online?
So I have no interest in any of this, but you could get proposals from different countries. The Koreans came, the South Koreans came, they visited Bataan, and they estimated that it would cost about $1 billion to get that Bataan up and running. That sounds like a lot of money, but consider the fact that you spend $350 to $400 million every year on importing coal. You could replace that, and the plant would pay for itself in 3 years. So, and that's just the start. I mean, that's Bataan. That's obvious. I mean, everybody in the world looks at Bataan and goes, "That's crazy. Like, why wouldn't you run that plant?" But if you really want to grow as an economy, there has to be a long-term plan. People have to come to agreement, and that means that people have to learn the facts. And I think it's incumbent on journalists like yourselves and others, because ordinary people, they're not going to do all the research. We sent an open letter to President Duterte, signed by some of the world's most famous climate and environmental scientists. And at the bottom, we put all the sources for the data. Where does the information come from? So people can find out for themselves. The final point I would make is that the environmental benefits of nuclear power come from the fact that you don't need very much fuel to... So this amount of uranium fuel in a nuclear plant could provide me with all the energy I live in my life, and I live a very high energy life. For the Filipinos, it'd be like that much. And the fuel goes in, and then when it comes out the other end as waste, that's it. It's just a piece of metal. It's not liquid, and it's not green, like on The Simpsons. And you can store it. It's the best for the environment because you can store it, make sure it doesn't go into the atmosphere as air pollution or as water pollution. It gives you a chance to both lift everybody out of poverty and protect the natural environment.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Cojuangco, if that plant is built, where are we in terms of storing all of that waste, and what about the safety precautions that's mandatory for
Let me reiterate what Michael just said. No, he said this for his entire lifetime. If he lives for 80 years, he's only talking this for 80 whole years.
Well, but that's
meaning
that's a very toxic material that cannot be.
But it's contained, and no other industry contains its waste. No other industry manages its waste. No other waste is audited by the international community. No other waste is prepaid for disposition. So it's only the nuclear industry that is really responsible for its waste. And it's not even waste at all. It's a lot of free future fuel. Because the amount of energy I get from this to power his life for 80 years, I only extract 3% of the energy here.
Just a fraction?
Just a fraction. Meaning in Generation 4 reactors, this is 50 times more free future fuel. So I don't even consider this waste. So you say how much? So if BNPP were to run, I would need to refuel BNPP once every 18 months. And I would only need an Isuzu Elf or a jeepney, if people who don't know what an Isuzu Elf is. A jeepney's load worth of fuel once every 18 months. Now compare that to a coal plant that needs 50 50,000-ton ships. That's 2.5 million tons of coal. That's a mountain of coal that when I burn, I create 9 million tons of carbon dioxide. I create 4 to 500,000 tons of coal ash, which goes into the air or into landfill, which I breathe, and which when it rains, contaminates the groundwater with heavy metals, mercury, lead, cadmium, and all of that. That never degrades. And it's not audited, and it's not contained, and it's loose in the environment. And so it's so far away. You say waste, but how much? How much are we talking about? The entire waste of Switzerland, which has 7 reactors, fits into a 1/4 basketball court. And that's for 40 years. You can see it. You can go up to it. You can touch it. It's in dry cask. So it's benign. It's managed. It's contained. It's audited. And the disposal, the final disposal, deep underground, is prepaid. It's paid for.
We have
Meaning to say, when they say that, hey, it's a problem for future generations, no, that's not true, because we already paid for it when we bought the electricity.
meaning that waste stays in the Philippines or that's shipped elsewhere?
No, it should stay here because it's future fuel. It's a great national wealth that people are not recognizing.
No, I don't quite understand it. If it is waste and cannot be used anymore,
It can be used 50 times more. It can be used. It
not,
can
but not
be
as fuel.
as fuel.
As fuel. Okay.
in generation 4 reactors for the future. In the meantime, we put it in interim storage in dry cask. If I had the decision making power, I'd put it in Pagasa
Pag-asa Island.
in an interim storage facility. I went to Switzerland to Betz now, an interim storage facility, which is located in the middle of 6,000 households. The local community loves it because it provides employment, and it's benign. It doesn't do anything, just sits there.
You know, one of the strongest arguments against nuclearization in the Philippines is the issue of safety. And in the Philippines, we do not have a sterling record of keeping safe what should be kept safe, like such issues as criminal evidence storage.
The
for
problem
example.
with the issue of why it will be safe is because the international community will, like I said, it's audited. The international community has the right to inspect it at any time. We're a signatory to that, and so it cannot be neglected because it will always be checked.
And we think of it this way: the worst accident kills a tiny, tiny fraction of the number of people that the normal operation of fossil fuel power plants kill. So every year, thousands of Filipinos die from ordinary air pollution, from the normal functioning.
Like sinking ships, for instance.
Yeah.
Let me add to that. No, he's talking about deaths of nuclear, and there's only one place in the world where people died, and that's in Chernobyl. But I want to exclude Chernobyl from the consideration of the deaths, because Chernobyl had no containment, and that is forbidden in the West.
No,
The only nuclear plants in the world that were built without containment were built by the Soviet Union, and those were the RBMKs that are in Chernobyl. That is forbidden in the West, and all nuclear plants in the West have containment. That's why when we had the triple meltdown in Fukushima, three at the same time, the amount of radiation that escaped was only enough. It was not even enough to increase the radiation in Fukushima to be above that of Seattle or Denver. And that's the worst that has happened. Not a single person died. Not a single person was injured by radiation. Same with TMI. So, if I exclude Fukushima, 0 people have died from nuclear in the entire 60-plus years history of nuclear power. Now tell me, what industry can boast of that kind of a safety? There's none. That is the safest ever. And you cannot get better than 0. So,
I'd like to
Right,
ask
Manny?
Mark or Michael here. We may have all the best arguments for the use of nuclear energy, but how do you intend to replicate the Taiwan experience here in the Philippines, given the wide opposition to the use of the nuclear plant?
It's already happening. I mean, we were at the Congress yesterday. You can see we had a press conference. We're meeting with senators tomorrow. I mean, look, when we went to South Korea 2017, Taiwan 2018, everybody said you can't persuade people about nuclear. But in South Korea, they had a citizens jury that deliberated for 6 months. They were 40% in favor of nuclear when they started. When they ended, it was 59%, almost 60% in favor. That 20% change over 6 months. In Taiwan, everybody said you can't change people's minds in Taiwan. They're too scared of nuclear. Same thing. Only 40% were pro-nuclear when the referendum started. The final vote, which happened in late November, was 59%, the exact same percent. So with no money, hardly, people, grassroots, going to the train stations, Facebook, and people's minds change. Because the thing is, nobody knows anything. Everybody gets their information from The Simpsons. And so once people learn, their first question is, why was I so badly misled? Why did I believe such mythologies? So once that happens, people don't go back. They know the truth, and it moves on. So, I think the really shocking question is, why has it taken so long for people to realize that nuclear is the safest way to make electricity? Why does everybody panic whenever there's an accident? And I think the answer is that people confuse it with nuclear weapons. They think it's something that it's not. They have the same name. But look, when you go to the hospital, my son had a stomach problem, and when I was anti-nuclear, they said, here, he needs to drink this barium. It's a radioactive liquid. Let him drink this barium, and then we'll do an X-ray. And I said to the doctor, is it safe? And the doctor said, yeah, it's fine.
For tracing purposes.
Yeah, to be able to see a blockage. Mm-hmm. So he drank the barium. I mean, so people, people clearly, if you understand what it is, you overcome your fears. You don't, look, I'm not a scientist. I don't think this is that difficult, but I know how to read a United Nations report and a World Health Organization report. So I think everybody's the same everywhere. Once they learn the basic facts of it, and once they learn how harmful smoke is, we're so used to the cities being like this. The cities don't have to be so smoky. It doesn't have to be like that.
I think the parallel argument would be like the use of medical marijuana for its benefits.
Yes.
And then this one also, the nuclear part.
Yeah.
I think I will have to ask you to dwell on the subject of if it makes more economic sense for the Philippines to buy a new one or just rehabilitate the
Michael
BNP.
said earlier, he said it would take $1 billion, because that's what the Koreans said it would take.
1 billion
1.15 billion
for rehab,
for commissioning.
for commission.
Actually, when you say rehab, it means you have to fix something. No, there's really nothing wrong with the BNPB. It's brand new.
But there are.
No, there's not.
It has been mothballed for how many
Yeah,
years?
there were. I read a report that there were quality issues like
I
welding,
okay.
the quality of the welding,
Okay.
and the pipes that transmit the radioactive separate from the non-radioactive.
Actually, over the last 10 years, I've really looked at that in depth and in detail, and really I can't find anything that they're talking about. They keep on claiming that it has thousands of defects, and one of the documents that were presented to prove that there were 1,000 defects is the FCNs. FCNs, like 10,000 of them were presented that these are the defects of BNPP. FCN stand for Field Change Notices.
Yeah, those were the
Field
quality,
change notices.
quality specs that have been altered after the
That's right.
plant was constructed.
No, during.
During, okay.
Now, when we buy a camera or a DVD or whatever, in the instruction manual it says a specification subject to change without prior notice. The plant was a turnkey plant by Westinghouse. It has the right to change if it feels it can do a better job to change the design, because we don't own the plant yet until they turn it over to us, right? That's one. Secondly, after TMI, we are the only there are 4 identical plants for
So this one.
right? Exact copies. Cory 2 in Korea, Angra 1 in Brazil, KRSKO in Slovenia, and BNPP. Magkapare-pareho talaga.
Same banana.
Same, exactly, identical. And the other 3 didn't bother with the TMI incident. They just decided to finish it and run it. We bothered. Marcos, because of protests here, said, let's form the Puno Commission and see what we can do to make sure that the plant is safer after the TMI incident. And the Puno Commission mandated changes, physical changes to the plant. And encompassed with those mandates, every single part that was affected had to have an FCN. That's why there are thousands. And so that's a consequence of the Puno Commission mandates. How can we blame the plant for being defective if it complied with the Puno Commission mandates? And it is a compliance that makes this plant safer than even the 3 sister plants that are still running today and are award winners.
For safety.
For safety, for performance, and for uptime, reliability, all kinds of measures. They're award winners. Because, I'll tell you why. They are newer than 70% of the 100 plants in America because they were built at the tail end of the first nuclear era. They're the last of the Gen 2 two-loop nuclear reactors built by Westinghouse. So they're the latest of that era. Newer than 70% of all the plants in America today that are still running.
So you're really saying there's a strong case for
Definitely.
opening the plant at a cost of 1.5 billion.
1.15.
1.15.
Yes. Rosatom is quoting $6 billion for a 1,200 megawatt VVER, brand new plant. Plus, that's just the cost of the plant. If you're a greenfield plant, you have to, the site development, the roads, blah, blah, blah. So it's additional to that, right? If you go by megawatts, so BNPP is 600, this is 1,200, so 6 billion, it's about 3 billion. So 1.15 is a bargain. And 1.15 billion is the same price you would pay for a greenfields coal plant. If you were to build a new coal plant today of 600 megawatts, it would cost you about 1.15 billion. Now I ask you, which would you rather have? The coal plant that will cause you to import so much coal and spend all your dollars, $350 million a year to supply it, or the nuclear plant which doesn't need that importation and does not emit any pollution whatsoever? It's a no-brainer for me anyway.
From the point of view of efficiency, yes.
Yes. Even for safety.
Yeah.
Even
Especially.
But that thing doesn't actually go away. People are still...
That's why you, the media, have your challenge. Because it's not us or the politicians. The politicians are lacking in courage. And if the people say, we want that, they'll just do it. And the only way to get the people to say, we want that, is the media has to have to report the right
I
thing.
think critics would go back to the reasons why the Bataan
This thing
nuclear
has
plant
become
was
a
mothballed.
political rather than a
Some
economic or
arguments
even
like
a...
the one you're explaining.
It's the same in the United States. I mean, so I'm a Democrat, but most people that support nuclear are Republicans. So when I talk to my fellow Democrats, they say, well, that's what the Republicans want. So, I mean, come on. People say, well, Marcos made that plant. Well, Marcos built highways, so don't drive on the highways? You know, Marcos built hospitals, so we don't go to the hospitals. It's just a tool. Nuclear is just a technology, like any technology. It can be, you can use it for good things or bad things. So I think we need to grow up a little bit. You know, we act like kids. Oh, this technology belongs to those people. That's just, come on. Let's grow up a little bit. The whole
I
planet
think
needs us to.
at this point in time, they're irrelevant, no, because they're already long dead, the protagonists of that era, and we spent $2.12 billion, 1.42 billion in principal, and 699 million in interest, and it was paid for in August of 2007. I know because I was defending the budget of the DOF at the time. And so it's paid for. It's sunk cost. It's worth 100 plus billion pesos. Are we just going to waste it?
It's just a matter of reviving the white elephant.
It's not a white elephant because it already ran.
Yeah.
It already ran during its hot functional testing in 1984.
Hot functional testing.
Yeah, hot functional testing is you put electric heating elements in the reactor instead of reactor
Of the fuel.
instead of fuel, you put electric
So
heating.
if it heats up the water.
You heat up the water, you generate steam, you run all the turbines, you run the condenser, you generate power to test everything for over a month. So when they say it's a white elephant, I laugh because they say it's a white elephant that never generated enough power to charge a cell phone. It generated 5 megawatts for on and off for over a month to test everything. So it did run.
So on leaks.
The
on
only
all those-
the only question was it was not allowed to run. It's not a white
I
elephant.
think it's just a matter of
Yeah.
explaining it to the people,
Yeah.
disseminating the proper information against.
On the following May of 1985, the IAEA came on an OSAR-2 mission, and it passed the OSAR-2 mission and was certified as ready for core loading. And then Marcos was playing politics and decided to delay it because he wanted to play footsie with Bosworth. And the events of February 86 caught up, and the rest is history. Nothing's wrong with that plant. It's perfect plant. It's a well-built, high-quality plant. And the workmanship is fantastic even today. You come there and I'll show it to you.
I'll say one other thing too is that what matters with nuclear, like all technology, is experience. You need to have experience using the technology. So the benefits of working with the Koreans is it would be a chance to bring all of the experience they've had
Filipino people
running
need
Cory
to
2.
want it.
Well, what about the issue of
If not, it's going to
we do not
people
have
will
the
say,
human
"Pinilit yan."
resource to
No, it cannot be.
run that facility if that were in fact put into operation? What about that, Mr. Cojuangco?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
We do not have the technical expertise, the human resource to run that thing.
Right. You would work, I mean, I think the obvious people to work with would be the Koreans, because the Koreans have been operating the exact same plant
Exactly.
since the 1980s as well, right?
Right.
So if they've had
It's
30,
1984.
so there's no substitute for experience. They have a lot of experience. They're just a couple of hours away, or whatever it is, 3 hours away up north from you. The Koreans have, and again, I'm agnostic. Whoever you want to work with, it should be decided by you guys. But the advantage of the Koreans, they've run that plant, the exact same plant for 30 years. They just got done building 4 reactors in United Arab Emirates. So they have experience working in other countries. They're the nicest people. I've been there many times. I think they would be a good partner. And then when you want to expand your nuclear after that, then you can choose between the Chinese and the Russians or the French or the Koreans. But the Koreans are sort of an obvious partner just because they have that exact same plant.
In the early 80s, we developed an entire cadre of operators. They were educated in the UP in a 2-year post-engineering course for nuclear engineering, and then they were certified as nuclear operators. They were when BNPP was mothballed, these people went abroad and worked for other countries on nuclear.
They've since retired.
We wasted them. By this time already retired, right? But they worked for power plants, they worked for coal plants, they worked for nuclear plants, they worked for gas plants, they worked for the electrical grid. You know, they were all kinds of experts at that time. And at that time, there was no computer simulators to aid training. So training operators today is much easier than it was at that time. And
In the analog days.
in Cory 2, there is a simulator built for Cory 2. I was there. I was inside Cory 2. It's identical to our plant. I was there in 2009 as a guest with another congressman. We were inside the plant. I saw the simulators, all computerized. We can train on that, our people. So after you let the Koreans run it, and then you transition over time.
What will it actually cost if that thing were allowed to open? I mean,
1.15 billion.
I mean, how long will it take?
4
for
years.
it? 4 years.
4 years to commission because you have to.
You have to train people.
No, yes, and you also have to go through each part and validate.
Mainstreaming issue.
Validate that it's according to the original plan.
And that's the time you need, because right now one of the risks, my understanding, is that Philippines is running out of natural gas in your Malampaya field.
Almost gone.
So you need to get started so that you don't have you don't want to go back to blackouts and brownouts. There's a lot of industries that would love to relocate. I mean, even China, as China grows, it sends some of its factories to other countries, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia. But if the industries don't think they can trust the Philippines to have cheap, reliable energy, they're going to go to other countries. So it's a chance, I think it's, Korea's a rich country now, even though it didn't have its own energy. And it wasn't afraid of nuclear, and it did get scared. Look, they got scared after Fukushima too, but when they take a look at it, they go, this is the best way to make energy.
We have 29 nuclear plants, and we were just at the same time with us, with Cory 2 and BNPP, sabay po yan.
They have 29 and we have 0.
And the Koreans, you have one.
We have one, but we're not using it up to now.
The Koreans said to me,
0.5.
When I was in Korea, one of the Korean scientists said to me, he said, I'll never forget it. He said, before we had nuclear power, we were slaves. And I was like, what were you, slaves? We were slaves to the external world. We were not free. We had to import all of our energy. We were dependent on the outside world. Now that we have nuclear, we're independent, we're strong, we're not reliant on other countries. Nuclear makes a country strong, and it makes a country rich. And I think that, Philippines is at a really powerful moment now. It's been 8 years almost since Fukushima. We've seen the worst of it. We know what can go wrong, and that when something goes really, really wrong, it has far less of an impact than just a single day of air pollution.
Let me expound on what he said. After Fukushima, Japan shut down all its nuclear plants, right? As a knee-jerk reaction. They should not have, but they did.
As a precaution,
Yeah, but
As an overreaction. As a panic. Yeah.
Okay.
and the Abe administration, who replaced the Noato Kan administration, fought hard to restart, and they already have restarted 10. But maybe this year they'll restart 5 more, right? In the meantime, before these were restarted, Japan's incremental import of coal and gas was $30 billion a year. Now, times 7 years, that's $210 billion of additional coal and gas import. Meaning, the wealth that Japan is trying to accumulate by exporting goods, it just sent abroad to buy something that they'll just burn.
So on net basis, 0 lang. Wash.
No, you're losing money. You're losing national
You're
wealth.
bleeding actually, yeah.
Right. No? So, if we send our relatives abroad to earn these dollars, we don't send goods. We send our relatives. It breaks families. It's a huge social cost, and then we squander what they earn. They so painstakingly earned for us. We squander by just burning it in fuel. It's tragic.
You see.
So it's tragic. It's a human cost.
What will it actually require to convince government to?
No. We need to convince the people.
So it's not government.
They're part of it, but the people count more.
I think the best pitch would be that one in Korea about being slaves to the outside world.
Yeah.
And then after they had this nuclear energy.
Who are your opponents in this case? I mean, who are those?
Traditional. Okay.
Who are those guys who would try to convince you?
Okay, well, we did some research on this, by the way, and it's all on our website.
Because obviously there are competing forces.
and the anti-nuclear groups take money from the oil and gas industry, and we've documented it. Other people have documented it. In other words, somebody is making a lot of money in the Philippines, in Korea, everywhere, importing coal and oil and gas. They will, and they should.
They will always.
They will fight it, and they will lose their money, and then they will sow fear. They will promote fear and try to scare people. How do you keep people down? You scare them. That's how you keep people down.
And they will promote solar and wind.
Yes.
Why? Because solar and wind entrenches gas, oil, and coal. Why?
How does that connect?
Okay. The capacity factor of solar in the Philippines is only 15%. Because the nameplate capacity of solar is only true on 12 noon of a perfect day. At 9 a.m.
Cloudless, you mean?
Cloudless,
Yeah.
perfect day. At 9 a.m. it's 50%, at 3 p.m. it's 50%, at 6 a.m. it's 0, and at 6 p.m. it's 0. The rest of the day it's 0. There's nothing, right? So what you need to do, you need to run your gas plant to back it up. So when you invest for incremental capacity, you're not only buying the capacity of the solar, you're buying another natural gas plant capacity to back it up. That's 2 plants. That's 2 generating. You're not buying 1, you're buying 2. Now, even if you overbuild solar, to compensate for the low capacity factor, so 15%, you need to build 6.7 times bigger to account for the lower capacity factor. You still are not addressing intermittency. It's still 0 at night, no matter how big you build it. And that's the same for wind. And nobody's addressing that.
Don't you have are the batteries incapable of supplying that?
Again?
Are the
Batteries, yes. They're
really
so
for
expensive.
the power, yeah.
Well, they can't. So,
Okay.
So yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, so nuclear plant produces electricity for 90% of the year. Solar for only 15%, right? So batteries, they work okay on your phone, but for a huge grid, for
industrial
cities,
size, no.
it's incredibly expensive. Even in California, we're the world leader in
Yeah,
batteries.
I've seen some of that. And in Las Vegas, I've seen
Yeah,
it
yeah.
in the air.
So to give you a sense of it, there is less than 30 minutes of battery storage in California, of all the batteries we have for the grid, and that's if you took every battery out of every car and truck in the state. So it's what Mark is saying is that what the oil and gas industry is doing is they go around and they say, get solar. We should use solar. Well, because they know that every time a cloud passes, you have to fire up the gas generators again. There's no batteries. The batteries are really expensive. That's for rich people. And even they don't use the batteries as backup most of the time. Poor countries need base load power.
Yeah.
You got to reduce the cost of energy. That's the most important thing for lifting people out of poverty.
Let me talk about batteries. There's a big battery in Australia. It's supplied by Tesla. It's $90 million. It's 129 megawatt hours. It supplies 3 minutes of South Australia's average demand.
3 minutes.
Now, if you're going to make it big enough to provide
Scale up.
24/7 solar, it's going to be worth $26 billion. Now, South Australia is tiny. It's smaller than Metro Manila. It is economically impossible. The problem is nobody does the math. Nobody does the comparison. They just say, oh, let's just do batteries. Did you ever compute how much that would be to make it 24/7? Nobody did that. So we should do that. You guys should do that. Media.
Oh, that's enlightening.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
Yes.
Manny? Any?
Yeah, I think let them have the final message on why nuclear energy is the most viable energy as against the other forms of energy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's such a new technology, actually, and it's so special because it doesn't produce smoke. But that means that because when things are new and different, it's easy to scare people. So what I would say to the Philippine people is, don't let people manipulate your fears. We don't let people yell fire in a crowded theater because it's dangerous. So when people are trying to scare you, don't let yourself be manipulated. Look at the facts. People can go to our website, environmentalprogress.org. We have all of the information there, all of the citations. Don't take anybody's word for it. People should figure it out themselves. But look at Korea, look at Taiwan. They've overcome their fears, and in the process of overcoming their fears, they've become rich countries and much more environmentally sustainable ones.
Okay, Mark?
For me, what drives me is the foreign exchange, because I was taught in economics when I took my masteral. The scarcest resource of the Philippines is foreign exchange. It has been our traditional limiting factor. We export our families abroad to earn these dollars, and if we're just going to squander all these dollars they earn on fuel and just burn it, it's such a tragedy. We should be using this hard-earned foreign exchange to build our nation. All the real estate development you see in BGC and in Makati and all of these other places in the Philippines is enabled by this foreign exchange.
Yeah.
So if we are to become prosperous, the definition of prosperous is a higher per capita consumption of energy. No? So it is bound to grow, our need for energy. When are we going to open the nuclear door? Because what are we going to build henceforth? Are we going to keep building coal plants? Are we going to keep on ever increasing our coal and gas importation? Or are we going to open our eyes to this nuclear, which will eliminate that need and make us free from that shackle of having to spend our hard-earned dollars fueling our prosperity? I want the Philippines to be prosperous. For my children and the grandchildren I'm waiting, I'm sure, I hope to have some soon. I want this for them. We're on our way out. No, it's for them. It's not for us anymore.
For our children's children.
That's right.
Okay, Manny?
Yeah. Sit up.
Okay, you're wrapping it up. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you so much.
enlightening, huh?
Thank you.
Very enlightening.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
I finally see you in person.
Thank you.
I
He
only
exists.
read about you in the news,
He exists.
in the years before.
Thank you.
This guy is... Actually, I didn't have a positive view of Cojuangco.
Why not?